Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I am here for my LEC Week 4 overview, analysis, and of course, at the end, my updated power rankings. A little disclaimer before we get into this video. If my energy level fluctuates a little bit throughout the video, or maybe you notice some weird cuts, or some cuts that just feel like they're coming in the middle of sentences and things like that. I tested positive for COVID yesterday, and so I am definitely feeling it. I'm definitely feeling sick. So I want to make sure these videos get out, so I'm still recording. You can hear it in my voice, I'm still able to record, but definitely want to take some precautions to make sure that I'm not making the audio any worse for you guys. So if you notice any weird cuts, or, you know, maybe if I'm not as energetic as normal, unfortunately, that's just going to be how it is for probably the videos this weekend. So apologies on that front, but at the same time, you're still going to be getting my analysis. Hopefully that's what you guys come here for, and that kind of stuff will not change. So if you guys are excited for this video, let me know down in the comments section below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into our first games here of day one. And what a week it was in the LEC. Certainly quite a bit to talk about. And that is encapsulated, I think, by the first game of the week, which was Excel taking on Astralis, and Astralis pulling out the 45-minute win. Definitely an upset here. Excel, a team that I've been hyping up a lot. If you watched my player rankings videos, which obviously if you haven't, go watch them. They're up in the iCard right now. But if you haven't watched those videos, you'll know I'm very high on Excel and how they play as a team. And even if you don't want to consider anybody on this team like by themselves a superstar, which I personally would disagree with, but even if you didn't, I think their team play and their macro has been very good so far this year. That was not true in this game. In fact, they should have won this. They very much should have. You can point to quite a few things, but what did Astralis do right? Astralis, I think, actually had a very interesting draft in this game. They first picked the Ornn. I think that's definitely a little interesting, but they're never punished. Never punished for it, so, you know, shout out. They get the Gnar matchup, which really isn't that bad for Ornn, and, you know, you're not spending a shit ton of jungle attention up there, so it's usually fine. What I really do like here is countering the Kalista with an Ashe. I think Ashe is one of those picks where I expect to see her continue to rise in popularity throughout pretty much all of the regions, because she does really, really well into these hyper-mobile ADCs. Kalista in particular. Ashe is very difficult. Those slows really hurt Kalista a lot. And as you see here, if you still build her crit and not the, you know, the Rage Blade whatever build that, you know, everybody else is going, she does a lot of damage, and she hurts a lot. Kabe is going to be my player of the game here. He was really, really phenomenal on this Ashe, especially in those late-game team fights. And a lot of that was, I think, draft. I think a lot of that was just how well Ashe generally does into a pick like Kalista. But let's give a lot of credit to Junghoon as well, someone who I've been very complimentary of since he joined Astralis here in the LEC. He was really, really good this game. You very rarely see such offensive Tahm Kenches. Tahm Kenches that want to play so aggressive and just want to go in and create. But Junghoon just has that playstyle. He's a very aggressive player, and it very much showed in this one. A big reason why they were able to gain so much tempo in the bottom lane was because of how both of these two played. But also want to give a big shout out to Chachi. This was probably Chachi's best game of the split here on the Ornn. Like I said, you blind pick the Ornn, and usually that's counterable. Like, usually you can punish that a little bit more. In this game, it doesn't really get punished. In fact, he's able to hold on to his tower for 8,000 years longer than he should have, because Finn wants to maximize creep, you know, killing, and blah, 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 ends up not being able to take the tower. That ends up coming back to bite them a lot in terms of pressure. But overall, I thought Chachi actually did really well in terms of rotations, in terms of team fighting. This is one of his better games of the split as well. But yeah, Astralis has really, really found a niche here of playing through what has been a surprisingly good bot lane, I think, for a lot of people, myself included. But for Excel, on the other hand, you're not going to be super happy about this loss. Your bot lane kind of got outplayed here, which is definitely not a good sign, because I was hyping them up to be one of the better bot lanes in the West. And they just weren't very good in this one. Patrick is going to be my dud of the game here. He didn't do anything, like, abhorrently wrong, but he really wasn't a factor in this game at all. And that's definitely not what you want to see when you pick the Kalista, especially when you have something like Lissandra mid, you have a Gnar top, you have a Trundle jungle. Like, this comp is kind of all centered around Kalista being the big damage dealer, and Patrick was really, really hampered throughout most of this game. Like I said, I think you can attribute a bit of that to draft, but I don't think Patrick played it particularly perfectly either. Neither did Mickey. I don't want to say that either members of these bot lane played well. And then Finn, I thought, had a rough one. Like I said, you sometimes got to stick around just a little bit longer just to make sure that you're able to get that tower, or you're able to get the, you're able to secure the objective. Unfortunately, just a little bit of greed costing Excel in this one. They very much had this game in their hands, I believe, but they just couldn't find the small margins in order to be able to fully take that win and make it theirs. So definitely frustrating to watch if you're an Excel fan, but you're going to be super, super stoked about this as Astralis. The outlooks of these teams, Excel has a really up and down week here, which we'll definitely get to, mostly downs, but with this game in particular, obviously, I think they still showed a lot of good because they were definitely in a position, even with a draft that I consider pretty bad, and making a lot of mistakes, they were definitely still in a position to win at the end of the game, which I think shows that at the end of the day, this team is still pretty good, but you have to be able to win these games. Like, these are games that some of the best teams in the world and a team that wants to go to Worlds just can't lose. So, yeah, definitely a rough showing from them. Not exactly what you wanted to see, but Astralis is going to love this. They continue to surprise people, especially this bottom lane, like I said, with how impactful they're being, and how much they're able to just win games, Jonghoon especially. But Kabe's kind of stepped up as well. I really, really think Astralis could be a sneaky dark horse to be a little bit of a playoff threat here. Definitely not saying they're a guaranteed Worlds team or anything like that, but they show a lot of fight in them. And if they were a team that maybe like randomly snuck into the top 6, I certainly wouldn't be surprised, especially with how this week has gone. So, yeah, honestly, if you're an Astralis fan, you've got to be pretty pumped after this win. Moving on to the second game here of day 1, we had Team BDS taking on the Mad Lions, and this one was not close. In fact, you can look at the score, you go, oh, 1-17, not close. Somehow, I think that score even doesn't tell you how not close this game was at all, how much of an absolute destruction Mad put upon BDS in this game, who are just so clearly like the worst team in the LEC right now. Like, they have absolutely nothing going for them, and it shows. Like, it shows in games like this, which are just, like, disgusting to watch. Like, I don't really know what else to tell you. This was bad. This was really, really not good. We can talk about Mad Lions. They're really good, but I honestly don't even know if, like, it was all them. I thought Elyoya played a really, really good early game here on the Lee Sin. We've seen this champion be hyper useless in pretty much every region so far, if you're not just, like, way better than the enemy. And in this one, he was. He was able to make plays early. He was across the map. He was getting Unforgiven kills. He was getting Niski kills. And it became really, really easy to snowball the game out of control. But not even that. Like, just they were given so much. There's one play that I very much want to go to, which was, I believe, the third dragon of this game, where Niski is chunked down to, like, less than half health. And he has to base on Lissandra. You have a 4v5 here as BDS around Dragon, and you have control over the pit. They don't start it. They posture, they posture, they posture. Niski doesn't have teleport. He has to back. He backs, and he walks all the way back. That's when BDS starts to go. And then they get absolutely wiped at the team fight. It's like they are asking to lose. Oh, I didn't even mention. That's when they decide to go in on the Ornn. Syncroft Jarvan ults the Ornn, and they just get obliterated. They go 5 men on the Ornn, and nobody's doing damage to the backline, and Zeri gets to just rip everyone apart. And yeah, this game was not good for BDS. This is probably the worst showing they've had this year, and that is certainly saying something because they've been the worst team in the LEC so far this year anyways, but this was even worse. Like, this was even worse. So yeah, not a good game. Elyoya is my player of the game because, like I said, he was doing a lot of really good stuff for this team early, but by the end of the game, it didn't really matter. And then Syncroft just got so out-jungled and so out-pressured this whole game. He's going to be my dud of the game for BDS. It's really hard for me to talk about this game for too long because it really was just like a complete and utter stomp. Like, there really was no talking points. It was like, oh, Mad got a lead, and they never looked back. That one team fight happened where everybody went on the Ornn, and they decided to posture up until it was a 5v5 and not a 4v5 again, and they lost. Like, what? I don't know what you want me to... There's really not a lot of analysis that needs to happen here. A good team completely obliterated a bad team, and that's just exactly what happened here. So, as for the outlooks of these two teams, BDS is awful. Like, they consistently look like the worst team in the LEC over and over and over again, and I imagine it will stay that way for quite a bit. I don't imagine that is going to change up. I had some hope for some of the players on this team. That is pretty much all gone. All the fire in them seems to be gone. Yeah, just not a huge fan of what they're doing. But Mad Lions, I mean, they continue to, do what they need to do. They are one of the teams that I think are vying for one of those world spots, and this is what you need to do. You need to beat up on the bad teams. You need to beat up on BDS. You need to beat up on SK. You need to beat up on Astralis and Misfits and all these teams that you would consider to be lower on the power rankings tier. You need to be able to win those games very consistently and not drop random ones in order for you to get that. So, yeah, honestly, a really good win here for Mad. They're going to have loved to, get this confidence builder and get an absolute demolition of a game here. But at the end of the day, I don't really think this shows exactly who either of these two teams are because it was just so one-sided. Moving on to the third game here of day one. We saw a little bit of an upset when we had Misfits Gaming taking down Fnatic. And yeah, I know I'm high on this Fnatic team, but this was not a good look. This was very, very, very much not a good look for Fnatic. I think you could put the blame on quite a few people in this one. But let's talk about what Misfits did right first. They played this map very, very conclusively, which is something that honestly, I'm very happy to see. This is one of the more impressive Misfits performances of the year as a team, in my opinion. I know we just talked about in my player rankings how a lot of times with Misfits, and even in their wins, it very much feels like it's VTO versus the world. But I think this was very much a team effort. VTO, I think you could argue, was one of the least valuable members of the team in this game. He was kind of he capitalized on a lot of the advantages that Misfits were able to give him. But, I mean, big games here for Mursa, who is my player of the game here. He was phenomenal on the Amumu, creating stuff all over the map. Big game for Neon, who was able to avoid pretty much all of the Caitlyn Morgana pressure and then be super relevant late game. Big game for Irrelevant, a great Gnar game. Him and Mursa just traversing the map together, creating so much. Those engages together were very deadly for Fnatic. Honestly, those three were all so important and good in this win. And that's really comforting to see for Misfits as a team that has really relied on the strategy of we have to get VTO ahead or else it really feels like some games we're just going to get out-skilled in team fights. It very much got to the point where it's no, actually, Mursa and Irrelevant can full engage, and Neon on this Aphelios can really just win us the team fight. And that was really, really good to see. Shlatan was fine. He didn't really do much, but yeah, he was good. I shouldn't say he didn't do much. He was just, everybody else had a little bit more of the flashy plays, I will say. He was going a little bit more of the tankier Wukong build. So, yeah, honestly, just a really good game for Misfits overall. Something that they're going to be, I assume, incredibly happy to have. As for Fnatic, a rough loss here, because you really just, they have these games sometimes where they show up and they're just not the team that they normally are. And a lot of that has to do with whether or not Razork gets put behind early. And he very much got put behind early this game on the Viego. Viego's always kind of been one of those picks that I think that Razork has never really been great on. And it definitely showed in this game. He starts losing a little bit early, he gets behind, he gets invaded, and then he can never catch up. He is completely useless the rest of the game. The entire map is Misfits to own, and there's really not much else you can do. Granted, not everybody on this team played perfectly. You can complain about the Shyvana build, however, I think the build is fine. Full tank Shyvana, I think, is fine. I know a lot of people want to see Demonic here, but at the same time, I get it. I get wanting to go full tank, especially with an Azir and a Morgana. Azir, full build, completely full build here at 37 minutes, doing 0 damage for Humanoid. Not great. Upset, dying in literally 1 second in the team fights. Not great. Really, this is just an overall loss for Fnatic, I think, as a team. It wasn't one player particularly being awful. I am going to give the dud of the game here to Razork because, like I said, it was kind of a little bit of a problem how much he got outskilled early game and how much he was kind of let down, how much Misfits was able to just capitalize on owning the entire map. But at the same time, it's not like Razork was the only guy on this team that was doing bad or that was a reason Fnatic lost. And, that's really the big thing with this Fnatic team is that sometimes they just don't show up. And I really don't know what that is for, even in playoffs. Really, it's not oh, this was just a random game in the regular season that they're going to drop. We've seen it against good teams. We've seen it in important games. They seem so coin flippy, very similar to DRX, I think, in the LCK. They very much seem like a team that some days are just going to show up and some days just aren't. Razork, I actually think, is very comparable to Pioshik. I think Pioshik's a better player, but Razork, in terms of, well, he's either going to win us the game or he's just going to run it, and he's going to get so far behind that we can't win. I think that's actually a pretty comparable comparison there to Pioshik, but, you have to be better than that if you want to be one of the best teams in Europe, which right now, that competition is higher than ever. We're seeing 5 teams really vie for a lot of these world spots, and, one of them's going to be left out. If Fnatic can't be the ones that are consistently winning, like it only takes 3 losses in the playoffs, and it only takes a couple losses in the regular season to make your job a lot harder come playoff time. So they need to figure that out. As for Misfits, they're going to love to have this win. Like I said, this is one of the more interesting and more convincing wins that they have had pretty much all year long, because it actually was a team effort. It wasn't just a couple players on the team were playing really well. Like VTO was able to keep the game, in hand, and then Neon was able to team fight later. Like this was very much a team effort. Mostly your role players here with Mersa and Irrelevant, who I thought were probably the 2 best players on the team in this game. So you're going to be very, very happy with this. Like I said, that, top 6 spot, like, especially after this week, like, it is very much looking like a top 8 instead of a top 6. So very, very intriguing to see, how the rest of the season progresses. But Misfits getting a win here off of Fnatic is definitely going to be something that they are going to be very excited about. Moving on to the 4th game here of day 1, we get our trinity of upsets complete against my top 3 teams in the power rankings, as SK Gaming is able to topple G2 Esports. And, at this point, what is this? Just like this is an EU tradition. At this point, it's an LEC tradition that at some point in the season, all of the top teams are going to lose to teams that they absolutely shouldn't lose to. Not to say that Astralis and Misfits are bad teams, but SK is a bad team. And they've been a bad team all year long. And, youch, like, this was not good at all. Let's talk about what SK did right. Akali. Woo! Akali. I love the Akali into Azir pick. I think that's one of the better things you can play into Azir in the game. And we're seeing a lot of blind pick Azir. In Europe especially, like, the LEC freaking loves Azir. It's just that a pick that I think no matter how average it is in the meta, you're always going to see it in the LEC because all of the players are so comfortable on it, kind of similar to Lee Sin in a lot of other regions. But I think you can really punish it with the Akali. Azir can't just perma push and just kind of scale up until late game and then be a killer team fighter. Like, he really has to, like, he's going to get pressured the entire game. And we saw that here. We saw Certus capitalize on that. Certus is going to be my player of the game. He was really, really phenomenal. He's kind of been the bright spot of SK all year long anyways. He's really shown a lot, I think, of good stuff for this team. And in this game, he really showed it as well because he outplayed Caps. Like, he was just better than one of the best players, arguably the best player that Europe has ever produced in this one. So that's got to be a good sign. Also, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Gilius was on a champion that is, like, relatively okay in the meta. No more Lee Sin for Gilius. He gets to play the Poppy, a pick that I'm a huge fan of. And Yankos picks the Volley Bear, which is a pick that I'm quite frankly not a fan of. So to see Poppy be able to super succeed here, definitely a plus for SK. More of this. Less of the Lee Sin, more of the Poppy. Also, another draft choice that I really, really love is the Sylas in the top lane. Obviously, Gnar got those buffs a couple patches ago where his ultimate cooldown got reduced by quite a bit. That, I think, unironically made Sylas an even harder counter to Gnar, and I really hope to see that a little bit more, because now Sylas can just steal Gnar's ult over and over again, and that's a pretty impactful ult, especially with Sylas having a dash. So, very much can see that being a problem in the future for blind pick Gnars, which is good. Blind pick, make things punishable. I think that's a good thing. So, honestly, just a really good draft here by SK. Good execution overall. They just looked really, really solid in this one. As for G2, they very much did not. Like, I don't know if this was an ego game or what it was, but this draft is not good. You're picking Lucian Nami and you spend no time bottom lane. The Draven pick is very, very good there because it really pressures the Lucian early. The Nautilus can help capitalize on any positioning mistakes, and Jezu was able to get a lot of cash outs in this game, but at the same time, like, blind picking Gnar, blind picking Azir, picking the Volley Bear, like, these are ego picks. There's really no other way to put it. Like, these are not picks that you pick blind against the best teams in the world, and they thought they could get away with it, and they were proven wrong. And this team is now sitting at 500. Like, I very much know that not a lot of people would expect them to be sitting at 500 here, but that's where they are, right? Like, they're a team that they've now lost to both BDS and SK, and also, like, they haven't been able to beat, like, the top teams either. Like, really, the only wins that they've had all year long have been the mid-tier teams, which is, it's just, this team has to start stepping up, because at some point I've got to start getting a little bit worried that they're just not as good as they think they are. Or not as good as they were in spring. I think the talent level in the LEC is much, much higher than it was 3 months ago. And I think we're seeing that in a team like G2, where, like, they're going to have to start stepping up their plays and their drafts to to really continue to be one of the best teams in the league. I'm not going to try to overreact. Like I said in the BDS loss, sometimes this just happens in the LEC. Like, there is no region in the world that underestimates bottom tier teams more than the LEC. Not just the players, but the fans too. Like, these kinds of upsets happen. And so I don't want to sit here and overreact and say, oh, G2's not a Worlds team, they suck, they're 500, blah, 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 blah. Like, they're still a very good team, but it's starting to get a little concerning because this is not a one-time thing for them anymore. This has become a little bit more of the trend. So hopefully they can figure it out. I really, really hope so because this team would do well at Worlds. Like, they're a good team and they have a lot of really, really fun players, and you just hope that they can get it together. As for SK Gaming, I mean, phenomenal. They're going to be so happy with this win. We'll get to their week in just a couple games here, the second game of the week, but, I mean, the Gilius Miracle Run, did they go 1-6 and Gilius run it down early season so that they could have this Miracle Run? I'm not saying yes, but I'm certainly not saying no, because they look, they looked a lot better this week, and I think they've got to be very, very excited. Certus continues to show development and growth for him to be able to outplay Caps, who, I don't think I said it, Caps is my dud of the game here, but for Certus to just be able to, like, actively outplay Caps, I think is a huge, huge development. Even with the counter pick, you've got to be very, very excited about that. They showed some interesting things in draft here. Hopefully they can continue that momentum throughout the rest of the season because this was a very, very interesting showing for them. Moving on to the fifth and final game here of Day 1, Week 4 LEC action, we had Team Vitality taking on Rogue. Rogue actually able to pick up the win here. Honestly, not too much of a surprise in terms of outcome, but definitely a very fun game to watch in terms of execution, because Vitality really is who we thought they were. Let's talk about Rogue, though. They continue to just be this very ultra, hyper-consistent team. It's what they've been all year long, and it's what they will continue to be, a team that will really not drop games that we see G2 drop games, we see Excel drop games, we see Fnatic drop games. Rogue doesn't do that. Rogue doesn't just randomly drop games in the middle of the regular season. There is a reason that they are often number one or near number one in the standings come playoff time, because this team is just ultra hyper consistent against teams that they know they are better than. And that includes Vitality here, who they very much are better than. They have a lane here that is really able to be capitalized on in the bottom lane, which, obviously this Rogue bottom lane has really stepped up over the past year. And they showed off that in this game. Obviously, I've said it multiple times on this channel. I truly do believe that Rogue is the best drafting team in the world. I think they consistently win draft, and it's a big reason why I think they are so successful, not only in early game plays, but, now Rogue time being scaling late games. I think a lot of that is because they often have a really, really good draft, and they often find ways to capitalize on champions' biggest strengths. That is very true in this one. Kalista is pulled out in the bottom lane, but you pull out the Taric with it. Obviously, Kalista Taric is a lane that we've seen many, many times over the years. It used to kind of be the way to play Kalista, but recently we haven't seen nearly as much Taric. This is the comp to play Taric in. Not only do you have Kalista, so you can throw Taric in, you get that invulnerability ult going, but you have a Gwen. Taric Gwen is terrifying, because not only can Gwen go invulnerable for a couple seconds with her own thing, but she can go invincible with Taric ult as well, which is just unbelievable. Like, this is a very, very scary comp to have to deal with. You have the Sylas into an Akali, a very good matchup for Sylas. Kind of shuts perks down a little bit. And then the Vi, who is just another hard go button. I really like this draft from Rogue, and they capitalize on it really, really well. Comp and Trimby just, quite frankly, outplaying Carzzy and Labrov at pretty much every level. It's very, very good to see. Comp is going to be my player of the game, but if you wanted to give it to Trimby on the Taric, you could as well. I really think it could go to either of them. They were both very, very solid. Mowering with a good game on the Vi, but Odo Omne was unkillable up in that top lane with the Gwen, especially in those team fights. So, as for Vitality, definitely not the game you wanted to see. They're really starting to show their problems, right? It's just that they're not quite who we thought they were. And a big problem and a big reason of that is the bottom lane here is just not good. I'm starting to get to the point where they're not even like a top 5 to 6 bot lane in Europe. Carzzy and Labrov are just continuously losing to pretty much everybody. Not to say that Comp and Trimby are like bad by any means, but they just don't look good in any of their wins, losses, whatever, right? Labrov goes in and gets caught out. Carzzy has to flash in to try and get those final autos in on the Taric, but forgets, I guess, that his champion's autos are blocked by minions, so doesn't actually get to kill anybody. Like, plays like that, it's just, it feels so silver, you know what I mean? And I'm not exactly sure what the reasoning behind this is. I'm not sure if it's a mental thing for Carzzy and Labrov, but we've seen them both be good players, just not like this. Very, very, very much not like this. So, yeah, you could give the dud of the game to either of them. For me, it's going to go to Lebrav on the Tahm Kench. Just was completely nothing the entire game. Carzzy was also pretty bad, though. So if you want to give it to him, sure, why not? Perks could do nothing on the Akali, going into a Sylas, can never kill a Gwen, etc. Haru continues to not really add to this team. Alphari continues to just be in the top lane and not really impact the game much. This Vitality team, when they lose, just really shows no signs of aggression and fight. But I think a big reason why they are often on the end of losing plays is because if their bot lane gets targeted, it is really, really easy to take advantage of that with how aggressive they play and how often they put themselves out of position. So, as for the outlooks of these two teams, Vitality is fine. Like, they're going to be in that conversation that I think is right there with Misfits, right there with Astralis for that final playoff spot. I really, really think that 6th and final playoff spot's going to be a bloodbath here. I think the top 5 for me is pretty solidified, although after this week, who the hell knows? But that top 5 has always felt pretty solidified, and that 6th playoff spot really feels up for grabs. If Vitality continues to play like this, honestly, like I'm leaning towards a team like Misfits. But Rogue is really, really good. They're ultra consistent. They draft really, really well. This is a team that I think, at the end of the day is going to continue their winning ways as long as things continue to go well for them. We saw that in spring. We saw it in 2021. This is a team that just will consistently do well in the regular season. It's all about the important matches for Rogue, which obviously we'll have to wait and see on. But right now, they're looking as good as they could possibly look in a situation like this. That's going to bring us to day 2 of Week 4 LEC action. We kick day 2 off with another upset. Some teams going 2-0 that shouldn't be, and some teams going 0-2 that really shouldn't be. We had SK Gaming taking on Excel, and SK picks up another win here, and it's another confident win. It's another genuine win. Definitely not an accidental win. SK looks like the better team here, and they are. For the entirety of this game, really. Again, off of the back of their mid laner just continuing to step up. Certus was someone who I think showed a lot of promise in spring, but was never really able to get results. And when this team was losing, he would often just, be fine and not really be able to do much and blah, 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 blah. But he's really matured and he's really grown over the past few weeks in terms of his role on this team of being the major carry that they really can pump a lot of resources into, and he can win the game for you. He was always known as an assassin player, always known as somebody who was good with resources. But he picks up the Sylas here, goes into the Talia. Pretty good Sylas game here. We're seeing a lot of prio on that in the LEC so far this week, but he actually does really, really well. He's able to take over the game with good macro. Him and Gilius, I think, were relatively active on the map. Gilius was able to get a lot of pressure early, again, on the Poppy pick. Again, amazing what Gilius can do when he's not on Lee Sin or another shitty jungler every single game. But he is going into Volibear because, I don't know. The West still hasn't figured out that Volibear is bad. But, yeah, I don't know. Those two linked up really, really well. And then Jezu was actually able to do a lot of damage here on the Kalista. Definitely a pick that I think a lot of LEC fans have been upset about. But at the end of the day, this pick is super, super good. We've seen it pretty much across the world so far this year that when this pick wins, it wins hard. Usually, I would say that that's not a super likely outcome into Draven, especially when I wouldn't consider you, without a doubt, the worst of the two bottom lanes, which going into this, I would say for sure Patrick and Mickey should be favored here. But they were able to take advantage of that Janna over and over and over again. And Treats was able to capitalize on that a lot with Certus going bot lane, and you were just able to create a lot of pressure. If it wasn't clear so far, Certus is my player of the game. He was really good. We get the Shyvana in the top lane. Again, I do like full tank Shyvana. I know some people are going to want to rush Demonic, but I like full tank Shyvana. I think it's underratedly good. So, as for Excel, this week is not good. This is returning to old Excel, just a tad bit, and most of that is just due to the fact that their bot lane really, really let them down this week. Patrick was my dud of the game earlier this week against Astralis. Mickey is my dud of the game in this one. The Janna was not the pick against Kalista. That is something that is super, super punishable, especially once you start bringing Sylas down bot lane all the time. You get a Janna that is just going to die on repeat over and over again, and that's essentially what happened. Mickey really had no impact on this game, and they got essentially run out of the building with that. So, not a great draft here. Again, we see prio on Draven. I think with a few picks here, I think Draven is definitely a pretty good pick into Kalista. I don't hate the ideology behind picking Draven into Kalista, but I certainly think you need a more actively aggressive support than Janna. Something like a Nautilus, if it was up, I think would have been a much better pick here. Just something that can give you a little bit more of that versatility. And then, like I said, not a huge fan of Volibear. I think Volibear relies so much on winning early And it's just very tough for him to do that right now because his dueling isn't great, especially into something like a Poppy, which just has infinite levels of map control early on in the game. It's kind of the big benefit to Poppy, is that the 2v2s with Poppy are very, very difficult to win. So, yeah, I don't know. Just not a huge fan of this Excel draft. Their macro continues to be a little bit poor. Not expecting a lot of the plays that SK were able to make. Honestly, just not the same Excel team that we had seen the first 3 weeks of the season. It is concerning. I'm not going to plummet them. Like, they're not like a bottom 2 team or anything like that in the rankings. But it's definitely something I'm worried about when it comes to outlook for this team. Especially because the big reason that I'm so positive and so upbeat about what Excel is capable of doing is because this bot lane really feels like it could be one of the best in the world. But they got outclassed this week. They got outclassed by Kabe and Junghoon, and they got outclassed by Jezu and Treats. Neither are world-class bot lanes. Yeah, I think Kabe and Junghoon are good. And Jezu definitely stepped up here with the Kalista, but at the end of the day, like, you got to be better than this. You have to be able to win these games, and you have to be able to win them convincingly, and they just weren't able to do that. Hopefully they can find their form, because next week they have a really tough slate of games. So, as for SK, I mean, a 2-0 week, they're going to be pumped about this. They had won one game this season up to this point, and it was beating BDS, who really can't beat anybody right now. So, they've got to be completely ecstatic that they were able to have a 2-0 week here, especially against G2 and Excel. It very much feels like a win for them. Certus continues to come along as one of the more promising mid laners in the region. Jezu continues to look good if he's able to get his lane state in a good, position. And, I don't put Gilius on Lee Sin anymore. Like, I really think that's it. Not that Gilius, I think, was phenomenal in this game. I certainly still think he's probably the least important member of this SK team. But at the end of the day, like, wins are wins. And shout out for SK, like, they're going to be so ecstatic with the 2-0 week. And they're hopefully going to carry that momentum into the rest of the season. Moving on to the second game here of day 2, we had the Mad Lions taking on Astralis, and Mad is able to pick up another win here off of some really good early game plays to get themselves ahead. Definitely some late game team fighting prowess, but definitely some Astralis plays that made it interesting. So quite a fun game here to watch in general. Probably my game of the week in terms of most fun to watch. But Mad Lions is able to come away with the win, and they're going to be very happy about that. This bot lane continues to be a huge positive for Mad Lions, especially them having one of the best supports in the world here in Kaiser. He picks up the Rel in this game, a pick that, honestly, I think has been underutilized in the meta right now. Yeah, I think engaged supports are a little meh, or at least they can be. But, at the end of the day, like, is there a huge difference between what Rel and what Nautilus are able to offer you? I don't think that much, and Nautilus is, like, super high prio in pretty much every region, so I think the Rel pickup here is actually pretty good, and we see someone like Kaiser who's really good on that champion be able to capitalize on that. Kaiser's going to get my player of the game here. He was really, really solid. The engages were really strong, really able to disrupt a lot of the team fighting that Astralis ended up wanting to do. But also big shout out to Elyoya in the early game on this Lee Sin. Again, a pick that I would consider quite weak. He gets it twice this week, and he actually looks pretty good on it. And I think that just shows you how good Elyoya is as a player. He's able to do a lot early game for this team. You have Niski on the Lissandra to be able to roam and play support here. You have Armut able to take away the Gnar after Astralis bans out the Sylas. I believe it was Astralis who banned out the Sylas. Somebody banned out the Sylas, and so they were like, I guess we'll take Gnar. And Chachi's forced to take the Camille, which almost paid off for them, but at the end of the day, they couldn't get it done. Just honestly, Mad looking real good here. Armut looking really good in the top lane. Elyoya making a lot of early game plays. Unforgiven and Kaiser continuing to be carries, and then Niski playing that full body support kind of mid laner style. Really, this is just your typical Mad win. Of course, Mad time starts to kick in a little bit in this one, because yeah, they had a pretty big lead early game, and Astralis did a good job to create some pressure in order to make that come back. Obviously, the 1-3-1s were really, really effective this game, and honestly, I think you could really make a case that Chachi almost won this game for Astralis in a side lane if he had just committed fully to pushing that after Mad Lions got the Elder Dragon. I think that there absolutely was a chance that he just gets Nexus there. At the end of the day, he doesn't. He TP's in for the fight. They lose the game, etc. It's fine. Very, very close either way. Both teams trying to make plays, but Mad Lions doing a good job of creating an early lead, and then, eventually they're able to close it out, even if it's not perfectly clean. Astralis, on the other hand, like, yeah, they lost to Mad Lions. It's not the worst loss in the world, especially with how they played towards the mid game. I really thought they were good at keeping themselves in it. That's something that they've been really good at all year long, is making sure that when they lose, they're not like blown out. I think that they typically are able to maintain pressure throughout the game, even if they don't have tempo or gold leads or whatever. They're still able to make sure that they're trading objectives and keeping the pressure on the enemy team. Unfortunately, in this game, Xerxes got pretty hard out jungled, so he's going to be my dud of the game here. Elyoya just had a really, really good early game, and the Trundle could really do nothing about it. Eventually, the Trundle was able to impact some of the team fights, but at the end of the day, he was probably the least important member here of Astralis. Chachi, I don't think, had a very good laning phase here. Obviously, the Camille in our matchup isn't super Camille favored, but at the end of the day, he almost won the game for Astralis, so it was really hard for me to give him done of the game here when if he really full committed to that split push, there is a chance that we're looking at an Astralis win here rather than a Mad Lions win. So overall, I mean, outlook-wise, like, Astralis is fine. They're still in that cluster, right? Like, Astralis, Misfits, Vitality, like, all of those teams, there's a very small margin between those two teams, and I think you could say the same for Mad Lions and pretty much everybody at the top. You know, your Rogues, your Excels, your G2, your Fnatics, right? Like, the margin of error for a lot of these teams, I think, is very, very small. And so games like this matter a lot, and I've stressed that a lot this week. Games, you know, that you need to win, like games against teams that are theoretically and power rankings-wise worse than you. Like, those are the games that you have to make sure that you're consistently winning in order to maintain your record in those standings. Mad Lions were able to do that in this one. They're going to be very happy with that. As for Astralis, this isn't a world-ending loss or anything like that. Mad Lions is a very, very good team, and they still were able to put up a fight, even if they aren't quite as good. So yeah, I don't think my outlook on either of these teams has really changed much with this game. Jumping into our third game here of Day 2 LEC action, we had BDS, Team BDS, taking on Rogue in a not-so-close game. And BDS continues to be not so competitive against pretty much anybody that they're facing. Yes, they had two really tough opponents this week, but at the end of the day, like, at least put up a little bit of a fight. This one was not close by really any means that you could possibly describe it. This was another blowout, another game where Rogue just looks like the better team. Let's go ahead and talk about what Rogue did right here. Everything. Like, I'm not exactly sure this is like hyper draft diff or anything. I've always talked about Rogue being a good drafting team, but yeah, I mean, BDS took some risks here. They go for the Seraphine Nautilus. They go for this quote-unquote kill lane, but you're doing that in the Lucian Nami, and you're just not as good, so you're going to get punished for that, and they did. Comp was able to get ahead because Trimby is really, really phenomenal on this Nami. It's the pick that he's always, in my opinion, been known as the best on. So yeah, I mean, shout out. Larson gets Lissandra here, and he's able to be all over the map because he's just better than Nuclearant, who has another bad game here. Malring on the Lee Sin just has to kind of do his part, and so does Odoamne, right? Like, everybody here does their role, and they do it well, and it's fine. Like, they win. Like, shout out. Like, that's what Rogue does at this point. So, player of the game for me is Trimby on the Nami. A really, really good week from him in general. He's always looked much better on Enchanters, especially Nami. This Lucian Nami bot lane was really their go-to at Worlds last year. And I think it's because this is probably Trimby's best champion. You see why here. That kill lane that he has, and especially the synergy with Comp, I think really, really makes this team dangerous once they get those two champions. I'm not in favor of blind picking them quite as much as a lot of other teams are, but I think when you're Rogue, you can get away with it because it really is your best lane, and it's proven to be your best lane over the course of the year. Larson, though, also had a phenomenal game here on the Lissandra, just able to impact the game on so many levels, able to stop Wukong engages, able to stop Silas from really doing anything this game. If you wanted to give it to Larson, that's great. Comp had a good one on Lucian, but really for me, Trimby was awesome. Like I said, Odoamne and Malring were good too. They just didn't have to do too much in this game because it was really over by the time there was any sort of team fighting. But for BDS, again, they suck. Like, I really don't know what else to tell you. Syncroft continues to try and be doing something. He wasn't so good earlier in the week, but he was all right in this one on the Wukong. He at least was trying to make plays. This is usually a matchup that Wukong should be able to win over the Lee Sin, but unfortunately he is team diff in this one. So Syncroft, yeah, while he was able to be all right, just not a game changer in any respect. Bot lane just got outplayed here. There's really no other way to put it. If you're going to play Seraphine Nautilus, you have to get ahead, and they most certainly did not. And so by the time that it was relevant, like, the game's over. Nuclearant's going to be my dud of the game here. He was just turbo useless on the Silas. That pick is pretty much completely shut down by Lissandra if you get behind. It's really, really oppressive to play into if you get ahead because you can shut down the enemy team as well and then also have a ridiculous amount of damage, which Lissandra can't put out. But when Lissandra is shutting you down over and over and over again, when you have a better Lissandra player than you do a Silas player, the Silas is going to look pretty useless, and that's unfortunately what happened in this game. Nuclearant has not been good so far this year. I think you could make a real argument that he's been this team's worst player so far in summer. Obviously, Xmatty and Airdot have not been that much better, but it's definitely one of those three, and Nuclear, I think, has cost them the most games, in my opinion. But, yeah, outlook-wise, BDS isn't good. Like, I don't really know what else to tell you. BDS kind of sucks. There's really not a lot of hope for this team, in my opinion. They draft poorly. They play poorly. Meh. Like, they're just the worst team in the LEC. Their last split's Astralis. Like, that's just what they are now. As for Rogue, like, 7-2. This is exactly where you want to be at this point in the season. Like I said earlier in the week with Rogue, they're hyper consistent, but their next week is like brutally hard. I think they play both Fnatic and G2 next week, so we'll really get a test to see if this Rogue team can continue their regular season success, or if it's a little bit different this time around. Honestly, I have no idea which way that's going to go, but it'll definitely be interesting to see, because right now, this Rogue team, at least in terms of consistency, looks relatively unstoppable. Jumping into the fourth game here of Day 2 action, we had Misfits Gaming taking on G2 Esports. Misfits able to pick up another win, and that puts G2 below 500, but we'll get to them in a minute. Let's talk about Misfits, because this truly was a difficult game for them to win, but they pull it out. Anyways, BTO's just really good. Not to say he was the only one on the team really doing anything, because the solo lanes in this one for Misfits really pulled through. And even Neon and Mersa towards the end of this game were starting to get pretty important, but really, when there's a Corki doing 8 billion damage, and when you have a top laner in Irrelevant who's just really having some good engages and keeping the team alive and being really proactive in team fights, like, this is exactly what you want to see out of a Misfits team that I think a lot of people were worried were one-trick ponies. You know, again, we're a team that I think similar to what we're seeing with a lot of other teams in the world that are kind of on the cusp of being one of the best teams in their region, but they've got one playstyle, and when teams really shut down that one playstyle, we find it difficult for them to win. I think Misfits is really starting to show some versatility. A lot of that, I mean, VTO is my player of the game, don't get me wrong, but a lot of that I think is the emergence, I was looking for the word there, is the emergence of Irrelevant in the top lane, who I think not a lot of people, including me, were super excited about coming in, but I said the same thing about VTO, and obviously VTO turned out to be super duper phenomenal. Irrelevant's come in and actually been really good for this Misfits team, especially in week 4 here. This was his best week as a pro so far by quite a bit, and he was really solid in this one. A big contributing factor towards Misfits' win. Him and VTO really stepped up a lot in this game, but wasn't all good for Misfits. My dud of the game actually is going to go to Schlatan here in the jungle, because I think you could debate over whether or not to give this to somebody on G2. I think realistically you could give it to Caps here on the Silas. I think you could actually give it to Broken Blade here on the Gangplank, which we'll get to in a bit, but for me, I don't think anybody in this game quite got outskilled at the same rate that Schlatan did in the jungle here by Yankos. This is one of those games where you type GG Jungle Diff in chat after the game, because he lost pretty hard early game here on the Viego, a pick that honestly we're just not seeing win very consistently in any region right now. He plays it into the Wukong and he loses pretty hard early. Yankos has pretty much full map control, and he relies on his solo laners to bail him out, and they absolutely do, which is great. Obviously, that's great for Misfits, but at the end of the day, I really think Schlatan had a rough one here, and was probably the worst player in this game. So he, for me, is getting my dud of the game here, and VTO is getting my player of the game. Moving on to G2 here, though, they were alright. Like, they showed some good stuff and some bad stuff. Like, they're really, like, they have to either be tilted out of their minds, or this team really just wasn't as good as we thought they were, because this is not the team that was they're not playing even remotely the same kind of game they were playing last split. Last split, I think they were very confident in a lot of their proactive decision-making. In this split so far, they've been very passive, and I'm not really sure what that is. You have very aggressive players here. Caps has always been an aggressive player. Broken Blade's always been an incredibly aggressive player. I would consider Flacket and Targamas to be a very aggressive bot lane. And none of that has really come through in their playstyle so far this split. A lot of them are, like, they'll get a lead and they'll kind of wait, and they'll just be super passive. And unfortunately, you can't really do that against a Corki and a Gwen. Especially a Zeri as well. We saw that really become an issue. You can look at someone like Broken Blade. He has a good scoreline. He's 2-1-10, right? But you watch the game, I'm not sure he really hit a barrel combo this game, because, first of all, it's really tough to play Gangplank into Zeri, because she can just destroy your barrels pretty much instantaneously. But outside of that, like, he's never been that good of a Gangplank, and he didn't really cause much for this game, right? Like, you look at the score and you're like, oh, he must have been pretty good. He really wasn't. He wasn't that good this game. Neither was Caps. Honestly, he's kind of been the driving force for them early in the season, but he's also kind of been pretty rough over the past few weeks. Ever since that loss to BDS, he's kind of been getting gapped a little bit in the mid lane. I definitely think that will turn around because Caps is just someone who I really just don't believe will ever be like a mid-tier mid laner for an entire split. Like, he's just not that guy. He's too good to be that guy, but at the end of the day, that's where he's at right now. He was not so good into this one. VTO was just better than him. Even if Caps was able to do a little bit more early game, the damage that Corki was able to put out late game into that Sylas was entirely unmatched. Like I said, Flacken and Targamas, you pick the Twitch, you pick the Taric. A very early game passive bot lane, not what I want to see from this team. It's really not at all. I want to see this team be aggressive, be confident, and push forward. That's what this team has always been best at, and I want to see more of that. So, outlook of these two teams, I mean, G2 is on probably the biggest skid that they have had all year long, and probably the biggest skid that you can imagine them having. We're getting in danger zone of, are they even going to make Worlds right now? Obviously, they're still a very, very good team, but man, like, that top 5 is hyper competitive, and somebody's not going to make Worlds. Right now, I'm a little bit worried it's going to be them. As for Misfits, like, this is probably a playoff team right now. They really have been that good. I'm not saying the difference between them and Vitality or something is, like, ginormous, but they continue to grow every single week. Not just VTO, obviously, he's the superstar, but a player like Irrelevant, and even like Neon and Mersa in the bottom lane, they seem to get better every single week by week, and if that can continue, obviously this team is going to go pretty far. So you love to see it. You love to see it out of that team, and you really hope and pray to see G2 figure it out, because this was a team that was, you know, in the semifinals at MSI not a couple months ago. So hopefully they can figure it out. Just right now, I would definitely say that they don't have it. They do not have it right now. They have to figure it back out. That's going to bring us to our final game here of Week 4 LEC action. And that final game was Team Vitality taking on Fnatic. And Vitality picking up a pretty big win here that I don't think a lot of people would have expected. This is a team that was kind of in freefall mode, I think, for a lot of, not only last week, but the beginning of this week as well. It very much felt like, they can beat the bad teams. They're not going to beat the good teams. Just too inconsistent. Even if they do have the talent level, maybe it's not quite where we need it to be. But the talent level very much stepped up in this. I know we've been talking about the bot lane being a problem, but this top, you know, there are a couple players on this team that are still pretty freaking good. Alphari really, really stepping up. Probably easily his best game of the split so far. He's going to get my player of the game here on Gangplank. Gangplank's a tough thing to play into Kayle. You have a lot of pressure early, but you really lose once that power spike hits. But I actually really, really like the draft here from Vitality to be able to neutralize Kayle quite a bit. Not only do you have the Xin Zhao that's able to go top repeatedly, even if I'm not a huge fan of Xin Zhao as a pick in general. I think the concept of Xin Zhao here is fine here, where you can just gank over and over again and kind of set that Kayle behind. But you also have the Sylas here, not only to steal the Kayle ult, which I think was super, super beneficial, but holy shit, a late game team fight here. Phenomenal play here by Perks to steal the Renata ultimate after the level 16 Kayle power spike and just have Kayle wipe her own team. Like, that is exactly what you wanted to see here. A really, really well-played game here from the top 3 here on Vitality. Alphari gets the player of the game, and but I really want to give a big shout out to Perks, who has really, really been underratedly phenomenal for this Vitality team all split long. He has really been the player on this team that I think has stepped up and has continued to be very, very good, even when this team is struggling. Yes, he had a little bit of a rough early game here against Humanoid, but, you know, that's what you get with Perks. Sometimes you're going to get a really good early game, and he's going to lead every single mid laner in every single statistic like he has been for most of the split. And sometimes you're going to get a really rough early game where he's trying to make a lot of plays here on the Sylas, and they just don't work out. But eventually, he's going to be able to make it work because, like I said, those late game team fights were completely instrumental in Vitality actually winning this game. So shout out to Alphari for doing an absolute boatload of damage on the Gangplank. Shout out to Perks for those late game team fights. And shout out to Haru for making plays throughout the game. Haru's been a little bit passive as a jungler here for Vitality all year long. He's kind of always been that, even going back to his time in the LCK, but he was very active in this game. He was very, very good. Top lane was a bloodbath for a lot of the game, which I think was the right call here. And it very, very, very much worked out for Vitality. Kayle took so long to get to that power spike, and even when she did, she wasn't really able to break the game. So even when you talk about this bot lane kind of being a little bit disappointing in terms of team construction, like, you could still win games with this roster because Perks and Alphari, if he's playing like this, still are very, very good players. So definitely shout out Vitality, a very good win for them. As for Fnatic, another rough week for them. 0-2 week, definitely not what you wanted to see. Wonder's going to get my dud of the game here on the Kayle. Like I said, just got targeted over and over again here. Was never really able to hit that power spike. And then even when he was able to, he was never able to capitalize on it because Perks had the Kayle ult to stop people from dying or, you know, even worse, he had the Renata ult to be able to have Wonder just kill everybody else on the team. Razork also had a pretty rough game here. He's had a pretty rough split, I think, overall. My opinion of Razork, I think, has dropped quite considerably in the last few weeks. I'm not sure if he's one of the top junglers in the LEC anymore. He's really had a rough go of it. Wonder, I do think, is fine. Obviously, the Kayle pick is very aggressive, and you need your team to play around that. You need some protection. He just didn't get it in this game. The one player I did think played relatively well here was Humanoid in the mid lane. Obviously, Perkz trying to make those plays early on the Sylas was caught out a lot by Humanoid and was actually punished quite a bit in the early game. Obviously, there wasn't really much able to do when you had a super fed Gangplank as a Zoe, so he just kind of he lost the game here, but at the end of the day, Fnatic still had at least one member of the team that I think there was a little bit of upside on. Just overall, not the best game of all time. Outlook-wise, this is a rough week for Fnatic. G2 goes 0-2, Fnatic goes 0-2. This is really just how the tides turn, huh? So I think Fnatic's losses are, I was going to say not quite as concerning, but at the end of the day, like, they kind of are, right? Losing to Vitality. Vitality's a good team, but they're not, like, a great team. They're not a perfect team by any means necessary, right? And they lose to Misfits, who are a good team. Like, I think that's more excusable than, you know, say G2 losing to SK Gaming. But at the end of the day, like, it is what it is, right? Those two teams are always going to get compared as the two biggest orgs in the LEC. And for both of them to go 0-2 this week, I definitely think is a little bit rough. Both teams have a lot to figure out. Fnatic in particular, the jungle situation is really not working for me. And I definitely think they have to figure out drafts a little bit more. Because every so often it just feels like, oh, we're just going to pick Kayle. And then they forget that they have to play around that. We're going to pick Twitch in the bottom lane, and neither of those lanes can really succeed on their own. So, yeah, not a huge fan of this draft. Viego is kind of a losing pick, even if you're going to get the Zoe ahead. Just a little bit rough. As for Vitality, you're going to love this win. You go to 5-4. That's probably better than where you thought you were going to be at this point in the season. So, you've got to be excited about that. Perkz continues to be one of the more underrated players in the LEC somehow. I know that there are a lot of, you know, people that would call me crazy for saying that, but he's had a very, very good split. And Alphari finally shows signs of the old Alphari coming back here. Builds full crit on Gangplank and is able to do an absolute metric boatload of damage. Haru with the ganks and everything. Honestly, Vitality looked a lot better in this game than they've looked in quite a while. So that definitely inspires some confidence. If the solo laners can continue to play like this, they might actually be a better team than a lot of people are giving them credit for. All right, that is going to do it for my LEC Week 4 overview and analysis of all 10 games across both days. Up on the screen right now, you'll see the updated LEC standings. Any ties in the standings will just be broken alphabetically. You will also see my updated power rankings in the first column with how that has changed in the second column there. Some big risers and fallers this week. Really, honestly, though, consider this at best like a placeholder week, because really that's what it is for me. It's a placeholder week. The top 4 for me are so ridiculously interchangeable of Rogue, Mad Lions, Fnatic, Excel. Right now I have Rogue at 1, Mad at 2, Fnatic at 3, Excel at 4. They are so interchangeable to me. Like, do I really believe that Rogue will be the #1 team in the LEC come the end of the year? No. Like, I don't know. I can't say that with any sort of actual confidence. But right now, they're the only team that has that level of consistency. Mad has it a little bit, but they still drop games that they absolutely shouldn't. They just beat really good teams pretty consistently. Excel and Fnatic had abysmal weeks, but at the end of the day, it's just 1 week. Like, how much do I put stock into that? The only one I feel comfortable dropping out of the top 4 here is G2, who I do feel pretty comfortable dropping to number 5 at this point. They need to refine that form. And until they do, they are going to be out of the top 4. So, yeah, they're sitting there at number 5. But you want to reorder the top 4, like, I don't know. I don't know who the best team in Europe is right now. I don't know who the 4th best team in Europe is right now. All of them are just kind of up in the air. So yeah, I have Rogue at number 1 and Mad at 2 and Fnatic at 3 and Excel at 4 because of consistency reasons. But at the end of the day, like, I don't have any sort of hard stance on any of those 4 teams being in that order. Nobody else actually changing. Misfits had a really good week, but so did Vitality, so it's really hard for me to move them down. Again, SK had a 2-0 week, but I still don't know if they're like better than Astralis. They pulled off 2 really, really surprising wins against 2 teams that they just had bad weeks, so I need to see a little bit more out of SK, and then obviously BDS at 10, I think makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, those are my power rankings updates. My player of the week this week, you know, speaking of SK, is going to go to Certus on SK Gaming here. He was really, really phenomenal this week. He has shown growth pretty much every single week that he has been in the LEC. This is kind of the encapsulation of that. He played really well against 2 of the better teams in the LEC here in Excel and G2. And he was just better than both of them, honestly. Like, outscaling Caps this week was a big accomplishment for him, and he was really, really solid. So Certus gets my week 4 player of the week. My dud of the week, though, I had quite a few options for this week, but for me, it is going to go to Razork on Fnatic, who continues, I think, a slow decline here, showing that he really wasn't all he was made out to be. Maybe VTO is a pretty good mid laner after all, but Razork honestly just didn't have it this week. He was not very good. He was really bad in their first loss, and then even in the second loss, I think he just kind of got out-pressured the entire game here by Haru, who is known to not have pressure. So, yeah, not a great week for Razork. He's going to get my dud of the week here, and then Certus is going to get my player of the week. But, yeah, if you guys enjoyed, please go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below, and of course, leave a like if this kind of content is stuff that you really like. Obviously, sorry if this took a little bit longer to come out on Thursday. Like I said, I had to take quite a few breaks in between filming this. Still definitely out of breath from COVID, so if the quality was a little bit, the energy was a little bit down, I do apologize for that, but let me know if you guys enjoy this down in the comment section, what your game of the week was, your player of the week, your dud of the week, all that fun stuff. You know I love chatting it up with you guys down in the comment section below. But with that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.